Imagine waking up and realizing the world just absolutely does not understand you. You've got these huge ideas, impossibly deep thoughts, and a brilliant mind that literally never ever stops. But at the exact same time, you are completely, devastatingly alone. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to walk through the story of a man whose relentless ideas ended up costing him absolutely everything. We are talking about Friedrich Nietzsche. Seriously, think about it for a second. What if the world's most brilliant mind was completely alone? His story, well, it's not an easy one, but it's deeply real. We're going to explore the incredibly heavy cost of ultimate intellectual honesty. It's a journey packed with profound takeaways for all of us. So, get comfortable, and let's take a look at how this remarkable mind was formed. Part 1. The Quiet, Heavy Child. From Rücken to Naumburg, 1844. Let's start right where this heavy journey began, with a devastating loss. Back in 1844, young Friedrich was born into a quiet German town. But tragedy struck really early. When he was just 4, his father passed away. His whole world flipped upside down as his family packed up and moved to Naumburg. To cope with that deep, heavy pain, he threw himself entirely into books. By age 14, he's so intensely disciplined that he earns a spot at the incredibly strict Schultforta school. But here's the thing about Friedrich. He didn't just passively accept what his teachers told him. He constantly asked, wait, why do we actually believe this? And that right there planted the early seeds of his lifelong habit of questioning absolutely everything. Now, moving into his university years, things really start to build. He makes 2 massive discoveries that offer him a temporary escape from his intense isolation. First, he stumbles upon the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Legend has it Friedrich read his work in just 2 weeks and finally felt seen. Schopenhauer's dark, suffering-driven view of the world, to Friedrich, it just felt like the honest truth. And then he meets Richard Wagner, the legendary composer famous for his massive, emotionally charged music. So, caught between these dark philosophical truths and this incredibly grand music, the lonely student finally felt, a little less alone. Which brings us to part 2, a meteoric, uncomfortable rise as the young professor. Okay, let's dive into this, because the academic success he achieves next is honestly almost unheard of. But, as you'll see, it came with a massive hidden cost. 24. Just 24 years old. Most of us are barely figuring out how to do our own laundry at that age, right? But Friedrich? He was offered a full job as a professor of classical languages at the University of Basel. His professors believed in him so strongly, they actually recommended him for the gig before he'd even finished his doctorate. That is just wild. But here is the catch. On the outside, sure, he's this highly respected, successful young professor. But on the inside, he is enduring an incredible struggle. His health was deteriorating rapidly. We're talking blinding headaches that would last for days, and his eyes were so incredibly weak that just reading caused him actual physical agony. And on top of all that, when he published his first book in 1872, The Birth of Tragedy, it got fiercely attacked. I mean, scholars totally dismissed his ideas, saying it wasn't serious academic work. So picture this. He's dealing with severe, debilitating physical pain and deep, crushing emotional rejection at the exact same time. Part 3. The Wandering, Lonely Genius. A decade without a home. All of this immense pressure ultimately forces him to leave his comfortable academic bubble entirely. His decline was just tragically paced. In 1879, at just 34 years old, the agonizing pain in his head forced him to resign from his professorship entirely. And around this time, he also splits from his close friend Richard Wagner. He was completely disgusted by Wagner's growing nationalism and anti-Semitism, which went entirely against Nietzsche's core values of individual freedom. So leaving his job and his friends forces him into a 10-year period of poor, isolated wandering. Moving between cheap, tiny rooms in Switzerland, Italy, and France, he has very little money and is pretty much entirely alone. Yet, this wandering leads to his major publications, like The Gay Science in 1882, eventually culminating in his tragic collapse in 1889 and his death in 1900. Part 4. Misunderstood Masterpieces. Words that shocked the world. Free from strict university rules and wandering around in total isolation, his absolute greatest ideas were born, which leads us to 3 very famous words published in The Gay Science. God is dead. Now, these words shocked society to its core, and this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate tragedy of Nietzsche, because he was utterly misunderstood.
He was not celebrating with these words. He wasn't being cruel, and he definitely wasn't being triumphant.
Let's clarify what he actually meant. God is dead wasn't a celebration. It was a deeply fearful warning. He was looking at modern society and seeing that it was losing its traditional beliefs and its old moral foundations. But the scary part? They weren't replacing them with anything new. He felt this was incredibly dangerous. He was honestly and quite fearfully asking the world, if we don't believe in the old values anymore, what do we believe in now? Who is going to guide us so we don't just fall into a totally dark void? He actually tried to answer that question by introducing the concept of the Übermensch in his later work. And again, this was deeply, deeply misunderstood. He was not writing about some literal, perfect superhuman out of a comic book. He was talking about the potential inside every single person to grow, to go beyond ordinary limits, to boldly create your own values, and to live life with absolute courage and honesty. But at the time, very few people could actually grasp what he was trying to say. Part 5. The final silence. The collapse of a brilliant mind. This brings us right to the tragic climax of his life, as all of this frantic, isolated, creative energy finally demands its toll. 5. In the single year of 1888, working with this manic, almost terrifying energy, Nietzsche wrote 5 entire books. It's like he felt his mind was working faster than ever, desperately trying to get out everything he had always wanted to say. It was this brilliant, blinding final burst of light. But then his letters started becoming strange. They just stopped making sense, and the people around him began to worry deeply. And then we hit January 1889, in Turin, Italy. He collapses right there in the street. His brilliant, restless mind just simply gives out. He's taken to an asylum, and his elderly mother actually has to come and care for him. For the last 11 years of his life, he never wrote another word. He never had a clear conversation again. He just sat there, occasionally playing the piano, smiling without really knowing why. The most restless, endlessly questioning mind of an entire generation had gone completely, utterly quiet. Part 6. Legacy and Lessons. A Posthumous Connection. Nietzsche died in August 1900, at age 55, still largely unread. But after his death, everything changed. His previously ignored ideas just exploded across the world, literally forming the very foundation of modern thought. But with that sudden fame came a truly tragic historical error. So the crucial point is right here. His ideas were completely stripped of their context and misused by movements with terrible, terrible intentions, including fascism and hatred. But when you look at the actual source text, it reveals a completely different man. Nietzsche wrote fiercely against nationalism. He wrote against anti-Semitism. He championed individual freedom and honest thought above all else. He would have absolutely despised how his words were twisted. Today, thankfully, scholars work really hard to impartially restore his actual voice, a voice that isn't about hatred, but about deep, sometimes painful honesty. So what do we actually take away from this explainer? There are 2 massive lessons we can pull from his lonely life. First, courage. Having the courage to think differently, to refuse to just be comfortable when the truth itself is uncomfortable. Nietzsche paid for that courage with his health, his friends, his career, and ultimately his mind. Second, loneliness. He was isolated pretty much his entire life, and yet his ideas eventually connected him to millions of people. It shows us that sometimes the deepest human connections don't happen right in the moment. Sometimes they happen slowly, quietly, across centuries. I want to leave you with this final thought. What are you willing to question in your own life? Nietzsche looked right at the world and absolutely refused to look away, even when it hurt. He challenges us to do the exact same thing. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning everything, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.